Today we are going to talk about 3 well-intentioned systems that breed disconnection and what we can do about them. Throughout our time together, I'd like you to be thinking about how these systems impact you, but also how they might be impacting the young people in society looking up to us as role models. To do this, I'd like to introduce you to one of my former students named Imani. Imani is a 7th grade student and was placed in my math class. She came to me reading at a 2nd grade level and doing math at a 3rd grade level. She rarely came to school, but when she did, she was disruptive, defiant, combative, and generally a very challenging student. Now, before we dive into the description of each of these systems, let's take a moment to define the word system. The Oxford Dictionary defines system as an organized set of ideas or theories or a particular way of doing something. Now that's a very broad definition. Let's narrow it down a bit by starting with the most basic yet powerful system in existence, the human brain. The human brain processes approximately 11 million pieces of information every second. With this amount of information flowing in and out of the brain, it needs some sort of organization or compartmentalization system within it to avoid getting overloaded. And researchers have recently discovered that the brain has several highly organized overlapping maps that cover as much as 20% of the brain. It is highly skilled at this. And to further demonstrate, let's take a look at some common organizational systems humans have created over time, beginning with Tupperware. Now, I love Tupperware, especially when it's brand new, because when it's brand new, every lid has a base, every base has a lid, and it's very organized and functional. But if you're anything like me, over time the Tupperware gets thrown into a drawer or a cabinet, and the lids and bases get lost, and it creates a lot of confusion and anxiety. But it's still an organizational system nonetheless. So thinking in these terms, we can identify thousands of organizational systems we all use on a daily basis: desk organizers, silverware trays, bookcases, and so many more. But it's not the organizing of things that breeds disconnection. It's when we start organizing people that the potential for disconnection is bred. So let's think of some of the ways that we organize people. One of the very first ways we do this, and one of my most fond memories from when I was pregnant, is finding out whether I was having a boy or a girl. So gender, that's one category, one label we put on people to help our brains operate smoothly. Another one is eye color. Another is hair color or hair type. Then we get into things like skin color, race, religion, primary language, accents, sexuality, gender identity. There are all these different markers that help us categorize people and fit them into different boxes, again, because this is something our brains are hardwired to do. But the mere act of noticing these differences is not a problem. We should notice these differences. We're all individuals, and these differences should be celebrated. It's when we start assigning meaning or value to these differences that is the catalyst for disconnection. But this is actually the result of a very well-intentioned system as well, and one that is deeply embedded in our brains called the amygdala, or the reptilian brain. That's whole purpose is to ensure that we remain alive and our species lives on forever. So let's think back to caveman days to see why this system exists and why it's functional. In caveman days, if we were going to interact with something that looked different from us, we immediately winced and thought, ooh, I don't know anything about something that looks like that. It's different from me. And I don't know if I interact with that thing that looks different from me, if I will get out of that interaction alive. It was literally a matter of life or death. And back then, our entire purpose was to procreate so our species could live on forever. Now, if we fast forward to today, present day, these systems are still hardwired into our brain. Our amygdala still exists, the reptilian brain still exists, the whole fight, flight, freeze mechanism, and we're still interacting with people and things that look different from us all the time. But 99% of the time, it's no longer a matter of life or death. But our amygdala, our reptilian brain, doesn't understand that. Remember, its whole purpose is to protect us and keep us alive. So between this and years of socialization and exposure to different situations, we still have that same wincing, knee-jerk reaction when interacting with someone different from us. So let's play this out. Let's suppose someone has a different skin color. We do the wincing, knee-jerk reaction courtesy of our amygdala, and we think, ooh, I don't know anyone with that skin color, or maybe it's accent or the way that they dress, and we assign meaning to it. It's weird. We know ourselves, we know we're good and we're safe, and therefore we must be superior to them. They must be inferior to us. They can't be trusted, and this pervasive pattern begins. So what does this pervasive pattern look like? It starts by us labeling someone or stereotyping them. We think we're superior to them, which causes us to make fun of them or bully them or harass them, but discriminate against them, leading to this destructive cycle of anger and hate and violence. We see this in the news every single day. We see stories of hate crimes being carried out against whole groups of people simply because they're just different from us. Let's move on to the second type of system that breeds disconnection, and that is technological systems. So, what is the point of technology? Why does it exist? In very rudimentary terms, technology exists to advance society, to propel society forward, and it has done an amazing job. Think of all the things that have come about as a result of technology over the years: electricity, cars, renewable energy, space exploration, and so many more. But these are not the technologies breeding disconnection. The technologies that breed disconnection are far smaller and are much more recent inventions. So let's rewind to a simpler time and a scene that we can all relate to: the school lunchroom. If we look at a school lunchroom in the 1950s, what do we see? We see young people sitting at a table, looking at each other, enjoying each other's company, connecting with each other, and so on. If we fast forward to today's lunchroom, what do we see here? We see young people sitting at a lunch table looking at their phones, connecting with their phones, enjoying their phones' company. But the phone itself is actually not the most damaging and connection-killing part of technology. It's what's on those phones that's the most damaging, and that is social media. Ironically, social media was invented strictly with the intention of connecting people to each other. But in the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen that it's actually had the opposite effect and is causing a tremendous amount of disconnection, depression, anxiety, and isolation in real life. But why? How? It's what I like to call social media perfection projection. What's happened is people have become obsessed with projecting a perfect image of themselves for the world to see. Their posts, their poses, and they've subsequently based their self-worth on how many likes or comments they get on each post. They see everybody else's social media perfection projection and they compare themselves. People are living their lives as a staging ground for their social media posts. They're making decisions about what types of activities they'll partake in strictly based on whether it will make a good post. And if they think it won't get enough likes or comments, they simply won't do it and will subsequently isolate themselves and get into this spiral of depression, anxiety, and disconnection in real life. The final system I'd like to discuss that breeds disconnection is educational system, or schools. I like to think of schools as a microcosm of society. If I'm on a high school campus and I'm going to English class, it's in one building. Math is over here. If I'm going to PE, it's in the gym, and so on and so forth. In real life, it's very similar. If I need food, I'm going to the grocery store. Medication, I'm going to the pharmacy. If I need a book, I'll go to the bookstore. But the one major difference between real life and school that is breeding disconnection is high-stakes testing. In the height of my teaching career, I was a teacher at a very high-performing charter school in Northern California. The beginning of my second year at this school, my boss pulled me into her office for our annual goal-setting conference, and she said to me, "Kristen, I think a good goal for you this year would be to double the proficiency rate on the Algebra 2 STAR tests." Whew. My heart dropped. Now, in full transparency, the Algebra 2 STAR test proficiency was hovering around 19%, so doubling it wouldn't exactly be hitting the proficiency jackpot, but it would still be a tremendous feat. So I took all of my formal training and kicked it into high gear. I was taught about the importance of lesson design, anticipatory sets, formative and summative assessments, Bloom's taxonomy, data-driven instruction, higher level thinking activities, and most important of all, bell-to-bell instruction. Not one single minute should pass where those kids weren't living, eating, breathing mathematics. I instituted several accountability policies, so there was literally no way any of my students wouldn't be proficient on that test. So when the scores came out in the fall, I waited very anxiously for the results. And I did it. We did it collectively. The proficiency exactly doubled to 38% that year and increased slightly in following years. So we won. We did it, right? Wrong. See, here's the thing. I was teaching in a school where theoretically all kids should be able to be proficient. We weren't teaching kids who were affected by the systemic barriers most of our students are facing each day, like pervasive trauma or poverty. These were kids from affluent families and by all accounts lived very comfortable lives. And we could still only get 40% proficiency. What was going on here? I really internalized that. I thought, maybe I'm just not that good of a teacher. Maybe I just don't have what it takes to reach that goal. So I started following the math data for the state of California. The 3 most recent usable years of test data show that we are hovering around 36% proficiency in math. So being the data nerd that I am, I look at this data and I say, okay, well, either all of the math teachers in the state of California aren't that good, or we've just been missing the mark somehow. And that's exactly it. We have been missing the mark. And the solution is so simple, but has gotten lost amongst the high-stakes testing initiative. The solution is human connection. The problem is that we were putting testing and data over the students themselves. We were asking kids to live at the top of Maslow's hierarchy without taking into account their love, belonging, and esteem needs. So let's see how this plays out in a typical public school student. Let's revisit Imani and the well-intentioned systems working against her. She was a beautiful African-American young woman, that's strike 1. She was struggling with her sexuality, that's strike 2. She was addicted to her phone, strike 3, and experiencing social media perfection projection, strike 4. And she was deeply entrenched in an educational system that cared more about test data than about her as a human being, strike 5. And yet, that year, her GPA went up 26%. Her discipline infractions went down 86%. Her reading grade level went up 33%, and her math grade level went up 50%. She flourished. Why? Human connection. I took the time to get to know her as a human being. I cared about her as a person, about her family, what was going on in and out of her life, more than the letter grade in my class or whatever test data she'd give me later that year. She had a real, honest, true human connection with someone who had her best interest at heart and genuinely cared about her as a human being. This happens to be the answer to all systems that breed disconnection, focusing on building relationships with each other, caring about each other as human beings, having the courage to look under things like skin color or accents or religion, getting to know the person underneath, and really taking the time to get to know each other's characters and personalities despite our differences in gender, race, culture, and religion. Imagine what kind of a world we would be living in if, instead of wincing and pulling away when we interacted with people who are different from us, we leaned in and we asked questions and we got to know each other as human beings. How much further along could we be as a society? I'd like to close with a quote from Steve Jobs. He once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path." Our well-worn path is clear. Our hardwired, deeply embedded neural pathways and organizational systems breed racism, sexism, classism, and so many other types of isms. Our smartphones and social media apps breed relational disconnection, depression, anxiety, and isolation. And our educational systems breed human disconnection by making the test more important than the student. We can continue operating in these systems in the same way that we have been for the past several decades, or we can choose the beaten path and attempt to make a difference by connecting with each other. Thank you.